Bookshop. We're so happy that you are celebrating our first anniversary here today. We've got children's book authors here who are about to present.
What's up? Hi, Melissa.
So we've got two authors who write fantasy for kids here. No dragons, right?
Dragons.
But witches and trolls,
Frost giants.
worry dolls that come to life. We've got some amazing creatures in these books here today. I'm Stacy Whitman. I am the owner of the Curious Cat Bookshop, and I'm so happy today to welcome S.J. Taylor and Cindy Rodriguez. And I'm going to pass the mic to you guys so that you can introduce yourselves and tell us about your books and give us a little bit of information about specifically Madsy and Lola.
Hello, I'm S.J. Taylor. This is my first middle grade book, Madsy the True. It's based on Norwegian folklore. Madsy's older sister has disappeared. Everyone says that her older sister was kidnapped by the Northern Lights, so Madsy sets off on a journey to rescue her older sister and bring her back home. And she is joined by Torin, who's in the lights, and Torin fell out of the Northern Lights. She lives in them and wants to go back home to them. They're also joined by Madsy's very annoying neighbor, Espen, who is hungry for an adventure and promises he can get him a map to where they need to go if they let him come with them.
Hello, and I'm Cindy Rodriguez. This is my middle grade contemporary fantasy. So what that means is that it's set in today's time, but there's magic involved, called Lola Reyes is So Not Worried. And the basis of the story is that Lola was in Guatemala for the summer. That's where her parents are from. And she finds a set of worry dolls. I don't know if you know who they are. So this is what they look like. They're these tiny little dolls that sometimes, kind of like when you're a little kid and you have like a favorite stuffy or something that brings you some comfort. If you tell your worries to the doll and you put it under your pillow, then you're supposed to wake up in the morning and feel better. And your worries are supposed to either be gone or you have knowledge about how to take care of your worries. So she finds a set of worry dolls that are wrapped up and there's a warning note. She's not supposed to use them, but she takes them anyway. And she ends up using them and they end up coming to life and they have a curse on them. And if she doesn't figure out how to reverse this curse, they will grow bigger and bigger and bigger until they finally sort of explode and spew worries all over town. So her job is to try to find them and reverse the curse, and she only has 5 days to do it.
Okay, so both of your books have a lot to do with family. So I want you to tell us about what in the story. Let me how to phrase this. We've got a sister story here. We've got a story about a little girl whose dad has passed away, and so she's got a lot of worries on her mind because of that. And we've got a missing sister. So we've got a dad who is gone and a missing sister. And what made you think about writing that for children, about loss like that?
Madsy struggled to get along with her older sister. Her older sister was always breaking the rules and asking too many questions. And Madsy wasn't understanding why her sister didn't want to just listen to their parents. Madsy is, after a year goes by, Madsy's also starting to ask some of the big and heavy questions. So she's learning to understand her older sister and why her older sister was wanting to break the rules, why her older sister was asking hard questions. As Madsy starts asking hard questions, like, where did my sister go? And how can I bring her back? Can I make my family happy again? And she does that through a lot of the stories that her older sister told her. A lot of the old folk tales. I was wondering, why did people tell these stories about monsters in the forest? What are they trying to do with the stories? Madsy's trying to figure out what was her sister trying to do with her stories. And Madsy has to figure out what's she going to do with her own story. How is she going to tell her own story the way her big sister wanted to tell hers?
So for Lola, she doesn't have a sister. She's an only child, but so it's her and her mom and her dad or their immediate family. In Guatemala, they have a much larger extended family. So when they go there for summer vacations or to visit, they're surrounded by family. But the difference is that when that vacation's over and they return home to Connecticut, which is where the second half of the story is based, now it's just her and her mom. And they have to learn how to live this new life without their father. And it is a hard thing for kids, right, to write about loss of that magnitude for kids. But I think part of why I think I was ready to tackle that subject was because I lost my own mom in 2021. And even though I'm not a child, my daughter was, she's probably like 13 at the time. So she's a little bit older than Lola was now, but she was young enough that that was her first major loss in life. And I was able to, it was actually good for me to kind of like reflect on how we responded to that. And the reality is that kids do experience heavy things at early in their lives, whether it's a pet that they've lost. Friendships could change and that could be considered a loss. Like if you're best friends with someone and then suddenly you're not best friends anymore, that you have to understand that loss is a part of life. So I kind of was a little bit like Mama in the story, where there were times when I tried to just present, like I'm okay, because I wanted to be strong for my daughter, so she wouldn't see me be upset. And then there were times when you're not okay. So I think that having gone through that experience myself and also having been a teacher for so long, I know that kids deal with very serious things all the time. And maybe this story can help them see that, talking about it and facing those worries is really one of the best things you can do, as opposed to hiding from them or running from them.
We've got somebody new, so I'm just going to reintroduce everybody so that we've got two authors here who are presenting their new books, and we're going to talk about them. So we've got middle grade books, which is books for ages 8 to 12.
I'm talking about that.
Okay. But the thing that I love about middle grade books is that they are really for any age. I like to think of them as family literature, the kind of books that you can read together with your kids or together with anybody because they're so adventurous. What made you guys... That fell over. What made you guys decide to write this age group? You've both written for different age groups before.
So I got my start writing books for teenagers, and that was kind of what that was my first love when it came to writing. That's what I thought I was always going to be writing. But all my books for teenagers always turned out really, really dark, even if that was not the original plan. And then 2020 came along. And in addition to the pandemic, there was also a lot going on in my personal life where I was pregnant with a baby, found out that he was going to be born with Down syndrome and a heart defect that was going to require open heart surgery when he was still very young. And writing was my solace and how I coped through heavy emotions, but I was like, I cannot do a dark, heavy book right now. I need something lighter to bring some peace to my life right now. So I decided I was going to try writing middle grade because it would push me to be lighter and more whimsical in my writing. And it did, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with the middle grade boys. I loved how it opened up room for a type of whimsy that there just was not place for in my YA books. I was able to write funny characters for the first time in my life, and before that I had thought I was not capable of writing funny characters. And I love the energy of middle grade. I love the hope that is embedded into the stories. I love the way that the young characters are able to ask really big and heavy questions, but to do so in a way that's very positive and uplifting and leaves them and readers with a lot of joy and a lot of hope for their own future, kind of no matter what they're going through, even if it is something really heavy like the death of a parent or a missing sibling. When it seems like the questions are too tough to answer, the kids aren't really afraid to try anything.
And for me, I actually was a public school teacher for 22 years, and most of those years were in middle school. So even though I also started with a YA novel, and I've written a picture book. This was my first full grade, middle grade novel. Got some dog excitement happening here.
So excited.
I know. So for me, I had direct experience with middle schoolers, and when this book was being proposed, I was like, yeah, I'm all in, because I lived that. I lived the middle school years for so long, and I agree with SJ that they're this perfect, like this wonderful, amazing combination of like seriousness and then completely jokey. Like one minute they could be in tears over something that's happened in the cafeteria, and that's very serious, and you want to help them with that. And then, the next day they're like skipping down the hallway. Like they're just like, sometimes they're still clinging to childhood, and sometimes they're pushing themselves to be like, I'm all grown up, I'm 12, like I can do that by myself and I don't need adults. And then the next day they're like, I want my mommy, and like my daughter was the same way. Like she'd still text me and like calls me mommy sometimes. So I love that age range where, like I said, they just are going through this huge growth physically, emotionally, socially, and they're kind of all over the place, and I love that about them. That's what I love teaching, why I love teaching that age group. Like they're so open, and they're learning, and they're changing, and they're really pushing boundaries as far as like trying to figure out who they are, where they fit, who their friends will be, who they will be. It's like this huge moment in life of like self-discovery. And I agree, like you can be funny, like you can be serious and you can be funny. And I felt like with this book, I was able to navigate those two things. Whereas with my YA novel, it was a little more heavy in terms of like topic. And there were some funny moments, but middle graders are just sort of innately like really humorous, at times. They just crack me up. So I was able to like explore that.
Got a frog in my throat today. Let's talk about, because you're both writing fantasy, so you've got very specific, very culturally specific creatures that you're dealing with. Talk to us about inspiration, like where you're pulling from in the real world, because I know that you are really into the Finnish folklore, right? And where you're pulling the tales from, and how you create a world, fantastical world that kids will really love.
So Madzi draws from Norwegian folklore, and past few years I've been deep diving into Nordic folklore across like all those far north countries, and I just love how deeply rooted those stories are to the lands that they come from. And when you think about like the old landscapes, the wildness of those countries, this isn't based on Icelandic lore, but like you go to Iceland and how unique that landscape is, and you look at it and you're like, you can't be part of this land and not believe in magic, not believe in something else happening. And I think the same is true for a lot of Norway, where there's still, even now, there's still such a great love and respect for nature and the old forests and the rock formations, and just feeling that there's something out there that's like more than you. And you're wondering like what's going on in the deep woods, what is happening when people aren't there. Why are there so many tales warning people away from wandering the deep forest by yourself? Stay away from that lake. Don't go outside because the northern lights could get you. You see the northern lights happening.
They thought they were spirits?
Yeah. Yeah. When you don't have the science to understand what's going on with the lights,
Yeah.
they're terrifying. And
Yeah, they ebb and flow, I mean, too.
Our young guess what a northern light is.
oh. So the northern lights, have you seen pictures of the lights coming down from the sky? Did you get to see the northern lights when they
Yes.
happened this spring?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it cool?
Like there was green and purple and like I see pink.
Yeah. Did your parents or your teacher explain to you why the northern lights
No,
happen?
we were at my house
Oh.
and my mommy woke me up like I think at 8 o'clock. at
Oh.
night.
Yeah. Do you think that they could be scary to some people if they didn't know what was going on? Yeah.
Like, we couldn't see them with our eyes, but our phones, if we look,
Yes.
we could see it.
Right. They look kind of like ghostly, don't they, when they're going across the sky? Yeah. So they could be really scary to a lot of people back then. But there's so many things that make it seem like there's something a bit magical about this land that we're in. And it fits really well in the middle grade where they're still kind of with like 1 foot in childhood. Magic still seems like it could be kind of real. And that maybe there really could be a troll out there in the forest that you have to outwit your way around.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a lot going on in SJ's books. We were just talking about that. If you like adventure, it's like every kind of creature you can imagine, her characters have to deal with it. So mine's a little bit different. This idea of the worry dolls comes specifically from the Guatemalan culture. And I actually adopted my daughter from Guatemala. So that was my inspiration and my desire to do this book. So again, when they were first created, children were told that the dolls were connected to a Mayan princess, and that she had the power of the Mayan gods to take away the worries. So it wasn't just like now if we have like a favorite stuffed animal, just brings you like general comfort. They were actually told that this was a piece of folklore coming from the Mayan gods, and so these like ancient children would believe that they were being sort of blessed by these gods, and that their worries would be taken away from a being higher and more powerful than themselves. So flash forward to this story, Lola is someone who doesn't necessarily believe in all that. She's more scientific minded and skeptical. And so she's like, yeah, whatever. Dolls are cursed. Curses don't exist. That's ridiculous. So when they actually do come to life, that's one thing she has to sort of deal with, is that like the Mayan culture is steeped in this folklore. And you have to, even if you don't believe in it 100%, you at least should respect it, and I think we would agree to that about most beliefs. Like, I don't have to believe what you believe, but I would at least respect your belief, right? So she has to respect this Mayan history and culture in order to be able to address the problem. So the idea here is that just like our worries, if we don't address them, they grow bigger. Like if I have a concern and I never talk about it, it gets bigger and bigger in my mind, and maybe then eventually I don't know how to deal with it. In the story, the dolls physically get bigger. So that's sort of like the manifestation of like the physical form of our worries. The dolls are getting bigger and bigger, and she's got to figure out how to reduce them. For kids, I think the interesting thing is that each doll is connected to a person with a certain type of worry. So one of her friends is an athlete, and she's very worried about performing. One of her friends has financial insecurity. Lola has the issue of grief with her dad. So the dolls are sort of connected to or become attracted to people with certain types of worries. And that's how she tries to figure out how to reduce the dolls, is she has to understand what they're connected to and try to reverse that.
Well, it would be like kind of teaching them how to problem solve.
Can you?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that, even though it's fantasy, because each of her friends has these different worries, and they have to figure out, okay, well, if this doll is attracted to Josie and she's an athlete, what could Josie do to diminish her own worries about performing at a high level all the time? So there's actually a lot in the story about problem solving, and also how do you diminish your worries instead of like them getting bigger and bigger. Like there are times when she puts on a meditation tape when they're in the car, because her mom's frazzled, and she presses play, and there's a meditation person saying like breathe deeply. There are moments of like art where they're playing with art. So art therapy there's all these things within the story that if you're really paying attention that way, you would see that these are all suggestions as to how in real life you can start to like reduce your anxiety and diminish your worries.
But all in such a fun way.
Yeah.
The thing that most people want to know from writers, I think you know one of two things that I might be asking you next. How did you become writers?
I was kind of
Publication.
I was kind of always one. I knew since I was 14 that this was the path I wanted to take. Required a lot of persistence to make it happen because I was not one of those teenage published authors. But I just kept working on story ideas that were speaking to me and compelling me enough to write them. Getting feedback from fellow writers who I trusted, who connected with my work, who could understand what I was trying to do and help me make it better. And my first book came out in 2021. I got the book deal before I got my agent, which is not the usual path. Struggled with a pandemic time release that did not have sales. Publishers were expecting it to produce. Never mind that it was in a pandemic with a dying publisher. Kept at it until I got the deal for Madsy, because this story brought me all the joy I was hoping it would, and I had so much fun working on it that I would have to make myself stop and do things like wash dishes or take care of my children, like things that need to actually happen.
The reality of life.
Yes. But it's like you just have to find the story idea that will keep you going through an ungodly number of drafts and revisions. Find the people who can help you make your stories better and get them to a publisher state, and just keep putting in the work.
Yeah, I also was like a reader and writer. When I was younger, I was always drawn to books. But I don't think I ever 100% had in my mind like I'm going to be a novelist when I grow up. I was more like, well, what can I do with this? Because I think I was more practically minded. Like, what kind of job could I do when my talent is writing? Like, my brother was an auto mechanic. He was pulling things apart when he was a cop child. My sister's an artist. Like, you could see what their talent was. But like, I was just like scribbling in a notebook, and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to translate into a career. I really didn't. And I don't think I knew anybody in the business or anything like that. So as I got older, I actually had my godmother took me to meet some people in like a journalism department when I was like in high school, and I was like, oh, that's a career, and that involves writing. I could do that. So I ended up double majoring in journalism and English. Again, still loving books and still loving to write. I worked at my student newspaper. I got a job as a newspaper reporter when I graduated college. I did that for 7 years. And then I I took a hard left and went into teaching because I felt like that was something I could do for a longer period of time. I didn't know I didn't think I could be a journalist forever, and things were really changing. But again, I was an ELA teacher and a reading teacher, still surrounded by books. And it was then in my teaching days that I had this story idea pop into my head that just wouldn't leave me alone. And like when I was younger, I just sat up one night in the middle of the night and started scribbling in my notebook. And it turned out to be what would eventually be the chapter 1 of my young adult novel. So I guess it was just like this thing in my head that I couldn't ignore. And I said, all right, well, it looks like I'm going to try this, you know? So I started writing that book, but I really had no understanding of how to go about getting it published because I wasn't in an MFA program or I hadn't learned any of those things. So a lot of it was like education by Google, you know, like what organizations exist that I can join, you know, conferences that I can attend. And I started educating myself about the publishing world and doing just that, going to conferences, joining organizations, going and meeting other writers. And slowly but surely, the book got finished. I got the agent. The agent was able to sell the book. Of course, that took in total, 7 years between when I was writing to when the book got on the shelf. But so it's a very slow process. But once that happened, I was like, I really like doing this. Like this reminded me of when I was a kid and I had these stories in my head. I'm like, now I can see the path. I can see that if you have these stories, yeah, they do turn into something. And I can do it. Like I am one of those people who can actually sit and get it done. So I'm just going to keep doing it. Woo! I'm going to keep doing it until someone tells me I can't, I guess.
Is this the book?
This is my first book came out in 2015. That was my young adult novel. So that was the very first one. Yeah.
Tell us about that feeling when you open up that box from your publisher and you see your very finished book for the very first time.
It's like, you know, fireworks are going off and it's just for you. Like you're the star of the show, even though it's just you on your porch, right? The same feeling I think when I got the phone call that was like, it's a done deal. We're going to sign contracts. I was teaching, I taught 3 years in a high school and went back to middle school. But I remember walking down the hallways of the high school and I didn't know that many people because I was new. And every person who passed me, I'm like, my book's getting published! My book's getting published! They're like, okay. They had no idea who I was, but I was shouting from the rooftops. And yeah, when you get that box and you see it in this form for the first time, you're like, it's a real, actual book. And there's my name and all the hard work that went into it. It's just oh, you know, the skies part and rainbows are glowing. It's wonderful. It's such a feeling of joy and accomplishment.
It's really surreal seeing your story in book format for the first time. When my first published book arrived finally, it was late at night when I noticed the box outside the door. And having this happen while you're a mom of very young kids is interesting because I remember it was 9 at night and I had been looking for weeks for the box to come and it finally showed up and it was 9 at night and I grab the box and I bring it inside and go to my husband and I was like, it finally came. And he was filming me and I never posted this video because I was in this nasty raggedy old sweatshirt and leggings and my hair was a mess. I mean, my kids were 3 and a few months old at the time, and I opened it up and I was just ugly crying because that was the very first time I'd ever seen anything of mine in print format, and I didn't get the early reader print copies they did because it was the pandemic, and so I was just ugly crying and it felt so bizarre. And then when Madsy came, it was my youngest son's birthday and we're trying to head out the door to go to a carnival for him, and I had been waiting for weeks for the boxes to come and they finally come, and I was like, as soon as I see the box I know what it is. I'm like, oh. So I opened it up and I didn't know that they were going to make the cover of Madsy shiny. they foiled the lights so that just the lights light up when the sun hits, and just so.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, my book came, and I was like, oh my goodness, look at what they did. It's just, I don't know, it just feels very surreal after months and years of working on this book and getting the book deal and doing more revisions with your editor, and then it's here, and it's a real thing. And
Is this the second publisher? Because you had said a dying.
this is a different publisher. I had to get another publisher to love me.
So they literally died from COVID.
No,
they just-
No, the business folded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the
No.
publisher no longer exists.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, the people are all still.
Oh, hey, you never know it was COVID.
No, I know.
Well,
So I'm also wondering, because these are books that are published for children, have you done school visits yet, or had any kids read your books, and what was that experience like for your book to be read by a kid?
I was just going to say, both of our books just released on September 17th. So they're only a couple weeks old. And I haven't yet had a child who's like, oh, I finished reading it. But last Saturday, we had an event in Plainville. And one of the local elementary librarians had kind of really talked it up with her students. And so we had kids come to get books, and they were really excited about getting them. And I actually that was like my whole family came, and of course, I love that they came to support me. But I was really excited that the kids came, because I'm like, of course, right? They're not in my family, and they're the target audience. And we were actually able to like put the books in their hands and be like, here you go. And so hopefully they're, in the midst of reading the books. And then actually on Monday, I'm going to be going to an event in Hartford that is a similar, like it's for the kids, and the Connecticut Association of School Librarians has purchased the books to give to the kids. So all 45 kids who are coming to this event on Monday will walk away with a free book. And so I'm excited about that. That's like the best part about it. Is like kids are going to walk away book in hand, and hopefully they read it and love it. But I love that it's getting to the right target audience. It's not just like my dad who's reading it.
My dad just figured out that I released another book. He found it out from like a neighbor.
Nice.
Anyway, haven't got to do school visits yet. I'm hoping I get the chance to. And as Cindy was saying, our books just came out like a week and a half ago. But I did get to hear over the summer about a young reader connected to a bookstore down in southern Connecticut who I'd sent them an advanced copy of my book, and the booksellers read it, passed it on to one of the kids of the bookseller who read it and liked it so much that she gave it to her younger sister to read, which, you don't get much more praise than that if a kid is telling another kid to read the book. So,
exactly.
And in a couple weeks, I get to go to the Avon Library and talk with their kid reading group there, who they all have received copies of Madsy. So I'll get to hear from some real kids about what they think of my book.
I think, well, I know I did. The realities of everyday children have to deal with so much more than, I did. But it's nice it's an escapism,
That's a really interesting. You're talking about fantasy as escapism, and I think that's absolutely true. But I think also that at the same time, it can help kids to deal with hard things metaphorically as well.
Yeah.
It removes them from their. What do you guys think about that?
That's one thing I really love about fantasy, and always have, is you can take real world struggles and issues and put them up against a different backdrop and setting, and it's often easier to think about them that way from a new angle and come up with new ideas, new applications, new ways to like think, oh, that's how that character, you know, resolved her grief with her older sister and learned to think about her life in a different way than and do so in a fun and energetic setting and come away with a lot of strength and new perspectives that I think it's a way to still come with some real life answers just from a different angle.
Yeah, I totally agree because I mean, in reality, like, you know, kids aren't going to be up against like the troll, you know, the actual troll, the actual giant, but there could be someone troll-like in their life, you know, or giant-like in their life that scares them, or like they have a worry. I was thinking, I was just read the scene where the girl who has the fear of the reindeer, you know, and she has to help in that moment, or they're not going to get out of that situation. You know, in my book, again, it's not like these like this can actually happen, but each of the characters deals with a very realistic issue, you know, whether it's worried about being having friends, or like I said, being an athlete and having to perform at top levels all the time, or like in Lola's case, having this loss and not knowing even how to speak with about it to her own mother. So the dolls are this, like, the metaphorical, as Stacy said, like, you know, if you don't talk about them, they get bigger and bigger, our worries, and the dolls are the metaphor for that. And they get into a whole bunch of shenanigans, and so it's fun and it's lighthearted in some parts of the book, but it also allows like children who are reading it to see that some of those more realistic moments, like again, even though SJ's book is set in 1750, they're still dealing with friendship issues. You know, she has to trust someone that she finds highly annoying and would have rather left at home. She learns about what it means to be a friend and to open her mind to what friends could be like. She considers Torin a sister. She's on a mission to find her sister. So like family and friendship, like what does that mean? Are things that all kids have to probably struggle with at some point. So even though it's the exact details aren't realistic, it's fantasy. Underneath that, there's a lot of realistic stuff that's happening that students can still connect to. I mean, I could have written a book that was just about grief and have no fantasy element whatsoever, and that's a whole different book.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different type of reader who might be attracted to that. I was interested in doing it this way because I wanted to have that balance. I wanted to be able to have some lighthearted moments and some fantastical moments, and then some serious stuff happening, and not have it just be 100% about the grief.
And I think that it's not about like bibliotherapy or handing a book to a kid. I see a lot of my kid is going through, or my nephew is going through X. Give me all your books about divorce. Give me all your books about pet loss. And I think that sometimes the best way of helping a kid through a thing is giving them something completely unrelated that just allows them to experience other characters going through hard things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So now that these books are out, what do you have coming next?
I'm working on my second middle grade fantasy with my new publisher. This one draws from Icelandic lore, some of the classic Icelandic sagas. They're medieval writings about the original Viking Age settlers of Iceland, mixed with a lot of fantasy. The Icelandic sagas are kind of pseudo-historical. So I'm blending together 3 of those sagas, giving a new voice and story to one of the female characters from the Icelandic sagas who got really shortchanged by the narrative she was in. I was like, this girl deserves a better story. I'm going to give her that. So she teams up with her best friend, Scratcher, They have to fight against a bunch of undead beings who broke out of a mountain and have invaded the valley where they lived. They have to fight off those beings to restore peace to their homes and families, or a young Helga is going to lose everyone she cares about.
Wow.
That's out summer 2026.
So very low stakes. No, I'm just kidding. Very high
Very-
stakes.
Yeah.
She's
Zombies. Kids love
yeah,
zombies, you know?
zombies and impending doom.
Axes.
X's, yeah, it stays very high on the adventure and the doom. I'm also working on my next middle grade contemporary fantasy, and it's about a girl who is of Brazilian descent, which I'm very excited about because my mom was Brazilian, and it's the first time I'm writing about Brazilian folklore. And there is a legend that in the Amazon rainforest there is a fire serpent that roams and protects the Amazon. And it's enormous, and it has burst into flames when it needs to drive people off who are there for no good reason and trying to hurt the rainforest. So my character is a girl who discovers an egg that turns out to be an egg of a fire serpent. And she realizes that she is part of this long legacy of people who are protectors of the fire serpents, and she is also a fire serpent rider. So she and her older sister end up going to Brazil. She takes the egg, kind of like Lola's not supposed to take the box. She's not supposed to touch the egg, but she takes the egg to Brazil because that's where it belongs. And it does, in fact, hatch. And she becomes part of this legacy. And at the exact same time that she's discovering this about herself, there is a construction crew that is slowly taking down parts of the rainforest near her family's home. And so she's directly now involved in this fight to sort of try to stop them and protect the rainforest today, which obviously it's still an ongoing issue. That should be out in 2026. I do not have an exact time, but I think it's going to be around the same time, which will be fun. We could do this again, tour again, because I think it's going to be around like summer, fall.
Oh, yeah. Built-in tour buddies again.
Exactly.
Have you met before?
Yeah,
Yes,
we're
we were friends and working on these different publishers, and then it just came down to the point where I was like, "Do you have a date yet?" And she said September 17th. I was like, "I'm September 17th."
Oh my god.
So it was nice that we were able to pair up at some of these events. Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy to have had you. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I'm sure that they'll be willing to sign books